neo-retro kick of pixel art games designed to evoke nostalgia by emulating the feel of much older games, often the 8-bit look of the NES era, has been around long enough to become ironically retro itself. Hell, I was certainly a much younger man living a far different life when I played Mega Man 9 back in 2008. What then is that game as it recedes into gaming history? Retro, neo-retro, neo-retro, retro? But neo-retro seems to be here to stay, its output currently flooding my gaming backlog with what seems like more games week by week. Pixels and chiptunes far as the eye can see and the controller can navigate. It's not quite a genre, as neo-retro games can be anything from platformers to RPGs to adventure games, and it's even a little bit more than an aesthetic, with how its nostalgic charms usually extend to gameplay as well. Neo-retro is an attitude, a mindset, a way of life. One I admit I'm fully on board with. I can't entirely explain it myself, but for some reason well done old school style pixel art just excites and entices me at least as much as, if not more so than, the most bleeding edge of technology graphical powerhouses from the AAA studios. Maybe it's something about admiration for artists working within limitations, like watching a chef create fine dining from Lunchables scraps, or a great painter working with crayons. And that's kinda how I felt about Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon, a couple of years ago. As much as I did enjoy the main event of the Bloodstained series thus far, the epic Metroidvania that was Ritual of the Night, which I did a review of, I'll link in the description, I have to be honest with y'all and myself and say that I think I probably enjoyed Curse of the Moon just a touch more. Enough so that in the rough draft of my top 10 video games of the decade video I never ended up making, it didn't quite make the cut, but I did shout it out in my runners-up. I played through Curse of the Moon about 4 times back when it came out. Its synthesis of retro aesthetics, gothic mood and style, and tough but fair gameplay really felt like the truest realization to me of everything the NES Castlevania games wanted to achieve. A leap forward for the past of the series it wasn't even officially a part of. And that brings us to this recent and semi-surprise follow-up, Curse of the Moon 2. And while at first I was like, what, y'all too lazy to come up with a new subtitle? Having played through the game, I now think I understand, as it does continue from the original in gameplay and in story, in as much as there is a story. All plot is thankfully, and I would say smartly, contained to opening and closing text scrolls and short pantomimed cutscenes that gently advance characterization in the Ms. Pac-Man tradition. Our Crimson Swordsman, Zangetsu, is still cursed and still taking the fight to all demonkind. But this time, instead of being initiated by the Trevor Belmont, Sypha Alucard-inspired trio of Miriam, Alfred, and Jibo, Zangetsu is backed up by a new trio of allies, Dominique, Robert, and Hachi the Mecha Corgi. Inti Creates got to flex their creative muscles a bit here, as these 3 characters are all far more unique than that more directly Castlevania 3 inspired set. What Dominique is showing off in the game's artwork ain't the only pair of impressive assets she brings to the table, as she also has long reach with her spear and a higher jump than the other main characters. It's hard to say who's better for combat between Zangetsu's strength and slashing speed and Dominique's reach, but she's better for platforming hands down, 10 times out of 10. Dominique can also plant a heart tree that can give you health. Not a ton of health, mind you, and it takes enough weapon points that it's hardly a full party refill. But if you're just shy on hit points trying to get through a tough room to a checkpoint, it can give you just that little boost you need. Now Robert is, well, I was gonna say he's the glass cannon of the group, but that would imply he's at least powerful in attack, which he's not. He's a slow weakling with barely any health who doesn't hit for shit. But what he does have is reach, shooting across the screen with his gun. Use him carefully and you can clear out screens without putting your more valuable players in jeopardy of taking a hit. He can also wall jump, although I'll be honest and say that I never found this useful for anything except pre-designed puzzles. I pretty much never used it in any kind of combat scenario. Maybe I just suck, but maybe Robert sucks too. At least in bosses, where he was always a last resort at best. But Hachi, let's just say this doggo is the goodest boy. Big health bar, big attack power, hover rockets to glide over gaps and target your jump landings far more precisely, and the ability to go invincible by hitting the weapon command for actually a good while if you have a lot of weapon points. He even has higher knockback resistance when playing in veteran mode. Hachi pretty much became my main once I got him, unless I wanted to keep him fresh for a boss I knew was imminent, because this doge is super useful for fighting bosses. And being useful for fighting bosses counts for a ton in Curse of the Moon 2, because it's really those bosses that are the choke points and where the vast majority of the game's difficulty comes from. The main levels can be tough, mind you, especially if you're on veteran difficulty, and taking a single hit, even at full health, can mean death if you're standing near a pit to get knocked into. But the stages proper never really exceed what I would consider kind of a medium to medium high difficulty. There's pretty much always an ideal character to get through any room. None of the platforming is terribly dire, except maybe for this damn room in level 7. You can fire up Hachi's invincibility to help you through a tough patch, and you almost always have the option to approach things patiently. Even some rooms that initially appear like chaotic hellscapes, like for example this gauntlet in the lava level, which had me going when I first played it, if you calm down and play defensively and use your ranged attacks, can be picked through carefully. Like for example, cleaning out the ceiling spikes here with Robert. Threats and gameplay gimmicks that initially appear daunting usually turn out to be not so bad, like this swarm of bugs or something that's not too hard to beat back, or these green appearing and disappearing blocks that initially horrified me, thinking I was in for some Mega Man-esque disappearing block shit, but with Castlevania controls. But which in practice you can just hustle along and you'll be fine. Big monsters with lots of hit points are usually slow, if not totally immobile, with predictable and repetitive attack patterns. But the bosses, whole different story. These bosses become nightmarishly difficult in Curse of the Moon 2 as you get into Episode 2, which I'll explain the details of the episodes in a minute. Far more difficult than anything in the original Curse of the Moon, which is another part of why the 2 in the game's subtitle makes sense. It's not just another game, but it's building off of an original it assumes you've played and can build from in complexity and difficulty. In playing through Curse of the Moon 2, the levels themselves are really just the gauntlets to soften you up for the battles with the bosses, where about 90% of the real difficulty comes in. There's little doubt you'll make it through the levels if you have a spot of skill at platformers. The question is if you'll make it to the boss with all your allies alive, and with plenty of health and weapon points and good sub-weapons, because ooh lordy, you'll need it all, especially your full set allies. There is no fucking press A to win here with bosses in episodes 2 and up. I would never claim to be some kind of big-dicked uber gamer. I'm not one of those folks who can do no death runs of Ninja Gaiden or beat that hover bike level in Battletoads or anything. But I'd say I'm decent enough when it comes to this neo-retro stuff, you know? When the aforementioned Mega Man 9 came out and everyone was saying how hard it was, I was wrapping up my third playthrough of it within about as many days. Played through Mega Man 10, no problem. Every game variation of Shovel Knight, no problem. The Messenger, and most pertinently to this discussion, Curse of the Moon 1 on veteran difficulty. Again, with no problem. Dusting them all. But I'll be fucked if I could manage some of the later game bosses in Curse of the Moon Episode 2 and up on veteran difficulty. Slowly but surely worked my way through the dragon and naked cloud lady and lava worm and so on. But when I hit this sarcophagus thing in level 6 with the rising platforms and the arrows and the flying rings and the beams and all the rest, I couldn't do it.
I can't do it.
I'm sorry, man, but
fuck it.
But by the time I had been playing Curse of the Moon 2 for a total of 8 hours and a full 3 of those hours been spent in this level, I'm sorry, I have a few precious gaming hours a week and I didn't want to spend a month trying to beat this boss. So down the difficulty went to casual and down Mr. Sarcophagus went on my first try. The difference in difficulty levels is pretty stark. Call me a pussy-ass bitch if you will, and honestly I'm not even saying I disagree. I hated turning the difficulty down. I really wanted to learn the boss and take him out on veteran. But the other thing that made it hard was how far back the damn final pre-boss checkpoints are from the bosses on veteran. If I died, then back I went, and it took 10 minutes to try to patiently work my way back to the boss again, without taking too much damage on my guys. Trying to learn a boss's patterns and how to counterattack when 90% of your time is spent trying to get back to the goddamn thing is an infuriating experience. I really wish there was a mode you could pick that let you keep the knockback damage and the general higher difficulty of enemies of Veteran while giving you the checkpoints near the boss you get in Casual. I'd have been more than happy to keep trying to learn how to fight him if only I had that one little thing. But hey, I know lots of people out there probably dug that challenge. If you're someone who can beat this sarcophagus on Veteran difficulty in Episode 2, whose brain works fast enough to actually absorb all that's going on this screen and react to it in real time while staying within striking range and simultaneously generating offense and defense, then I bow to your superior gaming skills. You exceed me in all ways. It's tough, bro. All the bosses are in the higher difficulties, except maybe the trained demon dude. He's not so bad. I took him out pretty easy. I mentioned the episodes a few times earlier, so let's go into that. You start with Episode 1, The Demon's Crown, which is 8 levels played consecutively, where you pick up your 3 allies over the first 3 levels. Those levels being a castle in the sky, a swamp, and a mine.
A mine!
You then head through the ice town, the lava caverns, the tombs, the lab or something, I don't know. And finally make it to the top of the castle and fight this weird bug demon thing. But of course it turns out this is really just a warm-up game in terms of difficulty and story and complexity. In Episode 2, Unbreakable Bonds, you're replaying the first 7 levels, but with 3 characters unlocked from the start, and new routes through the levels and much, much harder bosses. So here's where one big frustration comes in. Get this. In the first 3 levels in Episode 2, there are these hidden sword things for Zangetsu if you take the correct routes. And you take them to this altar in level 4, and this little cutscene plays out. Badass, right? Got some bomb-ass new sword, the Zanmatao, right? Except no, actually not at all. Your big reward for finding the magic sword bits and doing this ritual and getting the ultimate sword is having your cool sword combo skills removed. That's right, no bonus skills, removed skills, right back down to your basic sword slash. It's like winning a race and your reward being getting kicked right in the nutsack. And to rub salt in, beat Episode 2 now and the game skips the 3rd episode, Episode X, taking you straight to the 4th and final. And I guess that's okay for a handful of people out there who want to skip Episode X, but if I'm gonna play the game, I want to play the whole game. So once I googled what the hell was going on, I then had to replay the entire damn Episode 2 to get to Episode X. What a waste of time! Isn't this all backwards? Shouldn't getting the sword ritual thing give you the bonus sword powers and let you pick either of the last 2 episodes? What kind of backwards ass design is this? Super annoying stuff, my dudes. Big old thumbs down toward the floor on that one. But anyway, Episode X, Oath of Reunion. And here's where we're going to kind of get into minor spoiler stuff, albeit spoiler stuff that was revealed in the game's trailer. Your new trio of Dominique, Robert, and Hachi are predisposed, and your Curse the Moon 1 trio of Miriam, Alfred, and Jeeble are back in town, ready to rock out with They Cock Out Castlevania 3 style. So back through the same 8 levels as Episode 2 again, albeit with more new routes now, as Jeeble's bat transformation allows you to make your way up onto new ledges, and through little sneak holes and whatnot. And I'd say Episode X is yet a little harder still, now that you don't have Hachi's invincibility. And now that takes us to the final episode, Cleave the Moon. And here's some real spoilers, so I don't know, click away and come back after beating the game if you don't want to know some of the, shall we say, lunacy of the game's final act and gameplay and story twists. The gang determines that the demon general who has been threatening the world through this whole Curse of the Moon duology, this blood-faced mofo called Serial, literally lives on the moon, from where he sends forth and commands his demon army. So naturally they need to take the fight to him. So it's back through the first 7 levels again so you can gather the parts to build a spaceship to go to the moon. Yes, we abruptly go from fantasy to science fiction, but with a handful of interesting twists in the levels this time. The levels now have a little light seasoning of both a Mega Man and a Metroidvania flavor, as you now get to pick any order you'd like to tackle them in. In each level, you pick up one of Zangetsu's 6 allies, eventually forming an uber team of 7. That's 5 solid fighters, plus Alfred if you want to use a spell, and Robert if you want to clear a room or absorb a hit you'd rather a useful character not take. Robert, you're just you're weak. You're not good, man. You're weak, man. And each of the levels also has 2 hidden items in it, including maximum health increases, weapon point increases, and strength and armor upgrades. These items have always been in these levels all the way since episode 1, but you can now play through the levels as many times as you please to explore all avenues and try to track down everything and fully buff yourself. Thankfully, given the way the levels move forward and aren't as naturally built for back and forth and up and down exploration as a Metroid or an Igavania game, the hidden paths are, with 1 or 2 exceptions, pretty much always fairly clear. Just a little bit of common sense, checking out obvious points of interest, and you'll find all the items fairly easily. Now, I will say that while I appreciated this episode's twist and it is undeniably fun getting to play the Uber team, by this point I was kind of burning out and playing through the same levels so many times. Admittedly, a little that is my fault for having played through episode 2 twice, but I mean that's kind of the game's fault too, because why the fuck does getting the secret sword upgrade skip an episode and weaken your sword? Let's not relitigate this again. But yeah, 4 playthroughs of the first 3 episodes, plus doing each level here at least twice for all the items. Let's just say that I've had my fill of all these levels for some time. That's plenty of playing them. But you build that spaceship and yes, you straight up head into space. And the game becomes a freaking shmup for a while. This is, this is pretty delightfully absurdist stuff. I like when a game pulls a complete, what? Curveball like this. Nicely done, Curse of the Moon 2. Now, the final level on the moon is pretty fun for the extra gravity boost in your jumps, but I was a little underwhelmed by most of the lunar castle not playing into the outer space aesthetics as much as it could have. All the same, neat final boss fight against Serial. Gorgeous pixel art here, by the way, and that applies to basically every boss in the game. They're all fantastic, larger-than-life figures. We could only imagine actually playing on NES in the day. But anyway, kick Serial's ass, conquer the moon, and this opens up our optional bonus content in the forms of a boss rush and ultimate Zangetsu modes. So yeah, I can see now why the game is subtitled Curse of the Moon 2 rather than, what's some Castlevania-ish bullshit, Bloodstained Miasma of Shadow or some shit like that. No, this definitely advances the Curse of the Moon, as you literally do go to the moon and confront the curse. It's right there in the title wouldn't lie. And the 2 games basically do flow together as one more or less complete story. Picture me doing air quotes there, because the story is admittedly pretty thin. And they flow together as one complete gameplay experience with continually escalating difficulty and a continually growing cast of characters. Put together, they really do feel like a legitimate duology, not just 2 games that happen to be in the same series. That said, despite the clever twists of the level select final episode and the shmup stage and whatnot in this sequel, I'd probably have to admit that I prefer the original Curse of the Moon. In fact, drop the probably. Zanmato, sword to my throat, forced me to pick. I'll go Curse 1, which did feel like a tighter, more enjoyable experience to me, with superior level design and a more fine-tuned and enjoyable difficulty level. It certainly took me way less time. It took me 17 total sittings with Curse of the Moon 2 to beat all the episodes and whatnot, whereas I remember doing the same in Curse of the Moon 1 in less than 10 sittings a couple years ago. But of course your mileage may vary. Some people might consider it being a longer game nothing but a bigger recommendation, but I'm afraid that Curse of the Moon 1 outdid its sequel by leaps and bounds when it came to music. That game had some legitimately classic Castlevania-style chiptunes that I can still remember with great clarity 2 years later. Curse of the Moon 2's soundtrack rarely rises above the level of audio wallpaper. It's there, it's inoffensive, it does the job it needs to do. I never muted it or anything, but I also struggle to remember a single level's tune off the top of my head, and I doubt I'll be humming or listening to any of it outside the game anytime soon, or really anytime ever. Overall, if you're a fan of NES Castlevania, especially Castlevania 3, this is both more of the same in terms of doing the stuff you'll probably enjoy, trucking through them levels, fighting monsters, battling absolutely tough as nails bosses all in glorious 8-bit aesthetic, while doing just enough that's new to not be just more of the same. The new characters are a great addition, particularly Hachi, who is, as we've previously discussed, the goodest boy. The shmup is more of a novelty, albeit a delightful one. And the way the game opens up with a little Mega Man-y, Metroidvania-y flavor at the end feels like an appropriate culmination to this duology, even if I kinda wish it didn't constitute me going through the same levels the 5th or 6th or even 7th times. If you enjoy Neo Retro and haven't played the original Curse of the Moon and are interested, I'd play that one first. But if you have, then go nuts, sequel it up here. Just be aware not to get the Zanhato on your first playthrough of episode 2. But yeah, I'm digging the Bloodstained franchise so far and hope to see many more games. And to see it grow and also be ignored and neglected and then spun off into a series of terrible cell phone games no one wanted or asked for. Peace out everyone and be careful out there. It's a terrible night to have a curse.